to celebrate the end of this event than talking about wine, and no less than the wine that these lovely ladies have brought for all of us to try today. But before we get into that, I think we need to first talk about how you both got into wine. Now, I'm going to pose this question to both of you because, at least in my experience, I have never known someone intentionally try to get into the wine world. And I don't know if that was different for either of you. Jenny, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. How's the microphone? Is it working?
Yeah.
Yes, great. Yes, I wasn't intentionally going into wine at all. When I finished college, I went and did a PhD in French literature and film, and was lucky enough to end up in Paris doing research. And there I thought, oh my goodness, there's food and there's wine. And what a great part of life that I really my family never really cared so much about. We had family meal, but that's the extent of it. It's on Easter Indians. So one day I was waiting for the bus in front of the National Library where I was reading and studying and writing all day long. And there was a wine bar and a sign for a wine tasting in the suburbs of Paris that weekend. And I stopped and I read the sign, and this man, the bistro owner, came to the door and said, "Oh, are you interested in wine?" And I said, "Sure, absolutely." And he brought me into the bistro and started pouring things for me and poured this very cloudy Chenin Blanc into my glass. And I thought, this is incredible. I want to come back here for dinner. And I went and got my partner of the time, Francois. We had dinner and learned all about what we now call natural wine. And that weekend, we went to this tasting in the suburbs. And I went around and I spoke to each of the winemakers there. How do you make your wine? How do you grow your grapes? What's it all about? Why does this wine seem so intoxicating, more intoxicating than, not the alcohol, but the aromas, the pleasure of it. And each one separately said, well, I grow my grapes organically, or I grow my grapes biodynamically, which means no chemicals in the vines, no synthetic herbicides, no synthetic pesticides, just natural sprays, no polluting of the earth. And then in my winemaking, the grapes ferment, and that's it. And what I knew was there are lots of additives used in winemaking. And since then I've learned there are 300 additives that you can use in winemaking. And none of these are listed on the bottle except for sulfites. And even sulfites, it just says contains sulfites, when the range can be absolutely enormous. So each of these growers, winemakers, said, this is what I do, but I'm all alone. I do it, in my region in the world, and I'm the only person in that area. I'm the only person in that appellation who works in this way. And they all felt very alone in doing things that way. And I thought, this is intriguing. These are delicious. This is wonderful. I want to work with these people, and I want to bring them all together. And so they don't, they realize there's a movement. And that was really the beginning of my career, and also the beginning I sort of happened upon and helped to facilitate a real movement of natural winemakers. And so that's what I do. Incredible. So I import these wines to the US. My label is on the back of the bottle. If you turn the bottle around, of certain brands, it says imported by Jenny and Francois Selections. And that's my company, and that's my life.
Fantastic. Now, Laura, could you share with us the moment or inspiration that propelled you into the world of wine?
Yeah, so in 2008, I moved from Atlanta out to the Seattle area. And once I was there, I went to work for a chef doing some sales and marketing. And as I started getting more into what he was working on, I started being involved in the wine dinners. And it was a prominent chef. So in Woodinville, there's Chateau Ste. Michelle, if you're familiar with them, big brand. Around Chateau Ste. Michelle, grew, I think now we're up to almost 150 small boutique wineries right in that vicinity. And then you have the whole rest of the state. We're now over 1,000 wineries in Washington. So I was working with a lot of these local producers to facilitate these wine dinners, working with the chef with the menus, working on marketing and all the pieces. And as I started putting together this program, I was noticing just the amazing personalities and all of the passion that came from these winemakers. And we would have a dinner and one winemaker would discuss their intentions and their winemaking with very scientific precision, and another would come in as an artist and talk about their love of music, or they have a guitar collection, and you could see the way that those translated into how they're creating their art, which is their wine. And so as I kind of worked through that 5 years, I was at the restaurant putting together these programs and really building these relationships with the local winemakers as well as importers that were similar to Jenny through the distributors. And when I went to leave the restaurant, I didn't want to go just work for one winery and say, okay, now I can only sell these 5 products or whatever. And so I decided to start Belle and Bottle so that I could continue to curate wines from all these small producers, bring in imports, and really give people that exploration of always continuing to keep learning and trying, and in a way that, and I think we'll talk about this more later, but just in a way that's comfortable, particularly for women. It doesn't have to revolve around, this old critic telling you this is the right wine you're supposed to drink, but really learning on how you learn that for yourself.
So Laura, you founded Belle and Bottle back in 2016, if I'm correct? And if I'm also correct, your initial intention with Belle and Bottle changed throughout COVID. And how has your focus shifted since going through the pandemic in a way that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is at the beginning, we had a wine club and we had a local event piece to it, because wine at the heart of it, just like food, is a community, event, and it's best shared, which is why to me, the wine bottle is not a single serve, now it is a single serve can if you want it to be. But the intentions start with more, and it's to share. And as we had these local events, we were working on building the wine club, doing things locally, and we're getting ready to launch a program that was kind of partnering with local wineries throughout Washington to facilitate experiences and visits to get more people into their doors as well. And that's literally right when I was about to launch it, COVID hit and everything just, obviously all the doors shut. So that basically went from this huge opportunity to zero. And throughout the next probably 6 months, I was fortunate enough, I had been working with the Washington Wine Commission, and somebody called them asking about wine clubs that weren't just one winery, but kind of focused on a collection. So they offered Belle and Bottle. So I got featured in a Food and Wine article as a top club to join right at the beginning of COVID. And I was able to kind of take that and just push it through digitally and really grow the business online. And so that was that kind of unexpected pivot that I didn't have control over. And as that continued, I realized the reason I got into wine is really to connect with people. It's not for me to be running, wine sales over the internet, because there's, a million of those. And so what we've been doing over these past 2 years is really just trying to pivot that back to creating that community and really connecting producers like Jenny's talking about, these small producers that feel like they're doing something over here by themselves, and kind of working within and around the system of all of these, big wine corporations, big distributors, big grocery stores. How do you get these small producers to be able to have you guys recognize those names? And I think that's part of, with Jenny, she's putting her stamp on the back, I'm putting my stamp, on it by sending it to you in a club, is we're helping you say, this is how you kind of sift through the noise.
And your passion is community and wine, and your passion is wine, but specifically natural wine. So what about natural wine took your heart? Was it, like you said, that cloudy Chablis, or was it something more than that?
I think it's a few things. I mean, I was coming from academia, and I didn't really have a wine background, a business background. But when I heard these people's stories, I thought, I need to represent them. This is what I was meant to do. Because there's so much disinformation around wine, especially wine labeling. There's like a mythology that's so strong, that's part of the strength of wine, but it's also not totally truthful in that, that most wine is made from grapes that are grown in a conventional way using a lot of chemicals. Wineries are one of the biggest polluters in France, for example. But nobody wants to think about that because it's so romantic to think about French wine. This is a huge polluter in pretty much every wine growing country. And so part of it is a political choice. Like, I believe in organic agriculture, and I believe in organic viticulture, and make the choice to buy organic products in my foods. And I think that most people don't realize that they're making a choice when they go and buy a bottle, because it's unclear that there are wines that are made with organically grown grapes, or there's an idea that somehow these wines are not as serious or not as interesting. So I wanted to say some of the best wines in the world are made using organically grown grapes, and this is how they're made. And they're also not about the additives and creating a product that tastes a certain way each year. There's a terroir, there's a year, a vintage, there's a place, there's a history. And so how do you express that best? You express that best by growing grapes that express something of the earth and place and time, not by adding a specific yeast with a specific flavor profile to that wine. And so I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what wine is. It's an agricultural product transformed through fermentation. And so the serious winemakers who make natural wine, to me it's some of the most interesting, complex wines that really express something of place and time. And so it's about educating people and sharing these bottles. It's about pleasure. If there's a fault in a wine, it's my job to not import that and not put my name on it. So we're curators of bringing in and presenting things that are made by families in their homes and regions.
Beautiful. So since we only have a couple minutes left, I want to give you guys a minute each quickly to explain what selections you brought for the room to taste today and why. Laura?
Sure. So I brought 2 bottles today. One is from a winery in Washington called Rocky Pond. And Rocky Pond is a family-owned winery. They were a family that was involved in real estate development. So a lot of times you'll see with wine, the joke is, how do you make $1 million in wine? You start with 10 million. And so this family, I feel like they decided they want to participate in the Washington wine industry. And since they've made this dedication, I think what they're doing and the growth that we'll see from this winery will be really outstanding. They have a female winemaker. They have a full, their entire cellar team is all women driven. They're part of a Sustainable Washington project, which is kind of working towards what Jenny's talking about. So that's one of the things that I enjoy promoting, like people who are aspiring to get there as well. So that wine is a GSM, so a Grenache Syrah Mourvedre blend, so kind of a Rhone style blend for those of you if that's more familiar. And then the other wine that I brought today is one that I partnered with a friend of mine. And it's a male winemaker, but I've sold his products for a long time. Their family's a friend of mine. And the wine was so wonderful when I had the wine shop before COVID, it always sold out. And in 2020, he had a little extra production and he didn't want to keep all of it, and so I raised my hand and put my name on it. So we've been kind of working on that, and I named it Hustle in the Heart. And it's really a dedication. I was listening to a female entrepreneur seminar and somebody said that phrase, and I was like, I just took out my notebook and I wrote it down. I was like, that's the name of the wine. And the dedication for that, and the 30% of the proceeds goes to Belle. We have a foundation also, and the foundation supports female entrepreneurs. And so anytime that you buy this wine, 30% of that will go to the foundation, which then will help us work to support other women.
Beautiful. And Jenny?
I just want to add quickly that when I started out, there were almost no women importers, a few, and there were almost no women buyers, like in terms of sommeliers and buyers in stores. And the buyer part has completely transformed. I'd say it's 50-50 now after 25 years doing this, but I did spend many, many years in cellars with only men. So it's refreshing to hear some of your stories. It's been a long struggle, you know, as a woman to be taken seriously in the wine world. But here we are. And so I brought a few wines as well this evening, end of the day, for so we can relax and chat together. One of them is Azimut. It's a Spanish wine made by a wonderful family who is doing organic and biodynamic viticulture. They are also sustainably minded in that they renovated their old farmhouse so they don't need to use too much heat or cooling, and they have solar panels, and so they're doing everything to really not use energy and fix carbon in the soil as well, which is part of regenerative farming to fix carbon. So Azimut is the red from Spain, and then we also have a Beaujolais called Super Remy from a Beaujolais producer, Remy Dufet. So it's Gamay is the grape in Beaujolais, and it's a brighter, lighter, fruity wine, and I hope you enjoy.
Beautiful. Well, they're going to be sticking around, so if you have any more questions about their journey or the wines themselves as you're tasting them, feel free to ask them any questions you might have. Ladies, thank you so much.